On this episode of ArtisIan,
That's it? That's all we get?
oh good lord, the controls. So basically, if Yogi Bear was a Sasquatch. Who put espresso in his morning orange juice? And more crap like that. Last year, Apple announced its own game subscription service for iPhone, iPad, Apple TV, and Mac called Apple Arcade, which would boast over 100 games, many of which are exclusive to the platform. All kinds of indie developers, as well as some big-name publishers like Sega and Namco, tossed their coins into the ring to help make this as big a deal as possible. I've been hesitant to give it a try for quite some time now because a lot of the games on this platform seemed... not sure if I should say sketchy, but some game announcements took me on by surprise, some things looked amazing but might turn out to be flops, some things seemed like they'd be better off as a free-to-play game, and all that sort of thing. But I finally took a chance last month and started a 30-day trial of Apple Arcade. What I experienced was interesting. Some things surprised me, some things were akin to my expectations, some things I didn't end up caring about, and some things were downright disappointing. I'm going to showcase 12 of these games today. They won't be full reviews per se, because I haven't had much time to really dive into each of these games and get a full experience, so this is more of a first impressions video. So without any further ado, let's begin humbly with a game called Sneaky Sasquatch. Sasquatch wake up. Sasquatch hungry. Sasquatch hijinks ensue. If you've ever wondered what the simple life of a Sasquatch is like, well, look no further. Sneaky Sasquatch is a game where you play as, well, a sneaky Sasquatch. Your only goal in the day at first is to get the food you need to survive and get back to your warm, cozy bed. But of course, you can't be seen by the campers and especially the ranger. So you gotta sneak. On an iPhone, you hold your finger to make the Sasquatch run, and you repeatedly tap if you want him to tiptoe around. It's not a perfect solution though, because you can be caught both by making too much noise, as well as being seen. Your main source of food will be the campers' picnic baskets, which you sneak up to and swipe the food from. So basically, if Yogi Bear was a Sasquatch. Sometimes the ranger will even lay a trap for you, so be careful about any picnic baskets out in the open. As the game goes along, you'll be able to buy items from the raccoon's shop, such as a map to get back to your house faster, a fishing pole, paddles to go canoeing, keys to the vehicles further up in the campsite, and even a disguise to talk to the campers.
You wear a disguise to look like human guys.
There's a lot of depth to this game that isn't evident at first. It can be easy to pass this off as some simple food stealing game, but there's so much more you can do. I just wish I had the time to experience it all. I think this is a good first impression to Apple Arcade with something simple at first, yet fun. I can see why this is one of Apple Arcade's top billed games. So my verdict on Sneaky Sasquatch? Delicious entertainment food. Looks like we've had a pretty good start so far. Sneaky Sasquatch is a good first game for the platform. So let's see if we can keep up this stride. Up next is Spek. This is one unique game for sure. Spek is a game that plays with your depth perception, blending 2D with 3D. You have an outline of a 3D object that you can rotate, with a ball that follows the outline in 2D. It sounds weird, but it makes sense when you start to play. The goal is to get all the blocks in each level by rotating the 3D object in a way that creates a path with the outline for the ball, which moves on its own. You can reverse the ball's direction by tapping if you missed a rotation and need to go back. The kind of objects you deal with vary over time, and the puzzles get more challenging and even become physics-based at times. Sometimes objects will roll or tilt depending on where the ball is. See, this is the kind of game that I want to see on Apple Arcade. Games that offer very unique experiences that you can't find on other platforms. It makes you think for sure, because sometimes you got multiple objects or an object that's got multiple parts. So if you're not careful, the ball will loop around just one part of the object. Luckily, you're not on a time limit here, so you can take as long as you need to figure things out. This concept alone is enough to carry the game, and I'm very surprised this isn't one of the top downloaded games on the platform. I'd actually be willing to buy this game if it were sold separately from Apple Arcade. So my verdict for Spek is solid plus unique equals very fun. That was such a fun game. I can't wait to see what else Apple Arcade's going to offer. Oh no. One look at this game gives me a feeling of both deja vu and dread. I don't know why. Bandai Namco's offering to the Apple Arcade buffet is Pac-Man Party Royale, a 4-player Pac-Man game where each player competes to stay in the game the longest. Controls are basically the same as regular Pac-Man on mobile. Swipe in the direction you want Pac-Man to go, and he'll go that direction. Whenever you eat a power pellet, not only do the ghosts turn blue, but the player who got the pellet can also eat the other Pac-Man. You're slow at first, but as you keep eating power pellets, you get faster and faster. Wait, where have I seen this concept before? Oh, that's right, they already did this. This is basically an enhanced remake of Pac-Man Battle Royale, an arcade game where, just like this one, 4 players compete to stay in the game, and power pellets allow the player who just got it to eat the other Pac-Man. The difference is mainly in presentation. Party Royale is in full 3D with colorful graphics and varied maps, while Battle Royale was a quarter muncher, not a marginally more fleshed out mobile game. So this game runs on every Apple Arcade supported platform, so if you have one account and all 4 devices, you can do the game's local multiplayer. Sadly, there's no online multiplayer in this game, which kinda disappointed me. If this game had ads, it could totally pass itself off as a free-to-play game. It didn't need to be an Apple Arcade exclusive. My verdict on Pac-Man Party Royale is a distraction for a day. Oh, that was a bit of a letdown. What's the next game we got here? Another arcade revival? Just how many reboots has this poor frog been a part of? The latest of these reboots for the Nimble Froggy is Frogger in Toy Town, where Frogger has to rescue baby frogs that got thrown inside human houses by a tornado. Like the title suggests, your main obstacles will be toys, including cars and robots, as well as the terrain around you. Later on, there are levels in other parts of the house, such as the kitchen, where Frogger has to avoid fruit, toast, and stove burners. Frogger is able to climb up some things, and your physics do affect the environment, much like toys would react to building blocks or dominoes. You can pick up things with your tongue and spit them at enemies, and the frogs you rescue are collected when you hit a checkpoint. Get hit beforehand, though, and all those frogs disappear. You get a perfect score if you can get every frog to the end of the level. And that's the game. It's Frogger marginally expanded from his roots. There's no sprawling world to explore, your path is set in front of you and you need to follow it. Kinda disappointing since I grew up playing games like Swampy's Revenge and The Rescue, 2 games that turned Frogger's tile-hopping gameplay into a huge adventure, especially in The Rescue. However, Frogger in Toy Town is solid. There are other aspects to it as well, such as collecting jelly beans, and collecting enough of them will turn Frogger into Super Frogger, who is invincible. It does what it needs to, and it does with some polish too. I think Frogger's design here is a bit unappealing, but I think that's because I grew up looking at this adorable face for most of my childhood. Overall, a good game, but nothing extraordinary in my opinion. So my verdict on Frogger in Toy Town? 1 hop up. Namco may not have been giving it their A game for this platform, but Konami's offering fared way better. Though, I think I need to take a step away from the big company offerings for a little bit. Let's see what the indies are doing. Ooh, this looks cute. Way of the Turtle is a 2.5D platformer, similar to something like the classic Sonic segments of Sonic Generations. However, it's on autopilot, the whole time. That's honestly a bit jarring for me. You can switch directions and jump, but that's about all the control you have over this surprisingly quick turtle. Who put espresso in his morning orange juice?
Hey, the cheat, listen up! Wait, what did I say? What did I just say?
The story here is that this turtle has been separated from his girlfriend after a freak storm, so he needs to trek across this island to find her again. About halfway through the first level, you gain the ability to crouch into your shell, which will allow you to actually stop. That's a saving grace for sure, because this turtle has a lot in common with a certain Italian plumber. Literally everything wants this turtle dead. There's not much else to write home about. You can collect things, stomp on enemies, buy things in a shop that can help your progression, and just make your way to the end. That's basically it. I mean, for a mobile game at heart, I really didn't expect too much. The presentation's actually really good here and very stylized, but with good graphics comes a performance penalty on older devices. I had to run this on my iPhone, which has the latest and greatest Apple chip, because both my Mac and iPad struggle to keep a consistent frame rate. Anyways, I'd say Way of the Turtle is a pretty good game, but not a reason for you to run to Apple headquarters and yell at them to take your money. My verdict for Way of the Turtle is slow and steady is not too bad. Overall pleasant, but nothing groundbreaking. Way of the Turtle isn't a headliner, but if you took the chance to try it out, you'll have a good time. I just wish the next game on this list took some notes from this game. That's it? That's all we get? Rayman title screens are supposed to be upbeat, active, lots of stuff going on. This seems foreboding. Anyways, welcome to Rayman Mini, where Rayman has been shrunk in size to the point where all the vegetation around him is huge. So basically, Honey, I Shrunk the Rayman, just without Rick Moranis. The levels are presented as such, where you simply need to get to the end while trying to collect all 100 looms in each level. Okay, can we talk about this for a second? The last Rayman game on mobile was Rayman Adventures, which was way more fleshed out than what I just described. You had almost full control of your character, and your objectives included more than just getting to the end. You had to either save a certain number of teensies, collect a certain amount of looms, or defeat a certain number of enemies. Having Rayman Mini go back to the gameplay of Jungle Run and Fiesta Run is a bit of a step backwards if you ask me, especially after Way of the Turtle actually gives you the ability to stop. The levels themselves are fine, except there are way too many times where I had no idea there was a skull coin or another hidden object in a level until I got to the end, and the game gave me the Rayman equivalent of great, but you missed one box. You even get an achievement for this. It's not even that collecting all 100 looms gets you anything important, it all goes towards skins for the playable characters. But the level design is not even the biggest problem I have with this game. It's the controls. It's already a downgrade from Adventures with a drastically limited control scheme, but it doesn't even work half the time. Jumping, which you do by tapping the left side of the screen, is fine most of the time. I've had little issues jumping from one place to another, except when the game's physics decides it hates me. Everything else though is a different story. Let's talk gliding. Per tradition, Rayman can glide in midair using his hair. However, you need to hold the left side of the screen in midair to do it. Sometimes the game gets confused and doesn't make me glide until about half a second later, meaning I pretty much missed the looms or the ledge I was trying to get to. However, that doesn't even compare to attacking. You attack by tapping the right side of the screen. What the game doesn't tell you, though, is that doing it that way causes a half-second delay from your button press to when you actually attack. In a life-or-death situation, this is terrible. I've actually died from this delay. It's not funny. But what this game also doesn't tell you is there is a better way of doing it, swiping forward. As soon as you swipe, you attack. Why couldn't you have told us to do it this way? The only reason I knew about this is because I got confused after playing Adventures again, and I swiped. And it worked. The problem here is that most people won't do that. They'll do it the way the game told them to do it, which causes that delay I talked about. Sadly, for any merit that this game has, the controls absolutely ruin the experience for me. So my final verdict for Rayman Mini is, just play Rayman Adventures. Man, Ubisoft, you need to pay attention to what other developers are doing. There are better ways of handling your IPs on a mobile device, and especially on a new game subscription service. But you're not the only one who needs to do their homework.
Sonic Racing!
Oh boy, here we go. Sonic Racing, a slimmed down version of Team Sonic Racing for Apple Arcade. What did I expect? Well, I expected something similar to the iOS version of All-Stars Racing Transformed, which was actually pretty good. That was until I noticed it was Hardlight Studios developing the game, not Sumo Digital, who did the console game. Oh no. And oh no indeed, as straight away it gave me the same vibes that Sonic Forces Speed Battle gave me. The way the racers spawn in instead of already being there like in other racing games. And oh good lord, the controls. Alright, before I move on with this game, I'd like to point out that a few years ago, Sonic and All-Stars Racing Transformed was ported to iOS by Sumo Digital themselves, and it was a very faithful port of the original console game. So with that said, back to Sonic Racing. Why did I sidetrack? Oh right, the darn awful controls. Sonic racing games by Sumo Digital have a threshold for regular driving, and a separate drifting mechanic, where you can keep drifting while steering. You know, like every other racer on the planet. Except Mario Kart Wii. Anyway, Sonic Racing doesn't have that. You get drift boosts by making sharp turns, but you don't actually get to execute that drift yourself. It just happens automatically when you make a sharp turn. And look at this slip-sliding nonsense going on. This doesn't even feel close to natural. Plus, the game wants you to drift to get those boosts, yet puts you on some pretty darn narrow tracks for these kind of controls. I guarantee you these tracks are lower poly versions of the tracks in TSR, since the marketing seems to have one of these low-budget mobile version of a console game feels like Speed Battle did. Well, considering Speed Battle is now just called Sonic Forces on the App Store and has constant updates still happening, I think it's safe to say that Sega's replaced Sonic Forces the console game with Sonic Forces the mobile game. And I'm not sure what that means for Sonic Racing. Is this game going to replace Team Sonic Racing? If so, I'm not thrilled with the state of this game. TSR hasn't gotten so much as a content update, yet Sonic Racing is getting updated almost all the time. The implications this has on TSR's fate is upsetting. I hope that Sega doesn't pull this with the next Sonic game. This game is just not that good. The controls are bad, the pacing is bad, they only just added 4-player support but you're limited on how you manage your teams. Your teammates are never real people in online play, just the leaders, alongside the whole team mechanic from TSR, where even if you perform well, If your AI teammates slack off, then your whole team loses. And there's no way to pass on items like the console game either. Sheesh, I do not like this game at all. Actually, for the first time in this video, I feel like this was a complete waste of my time. I actually would rather play Mario Kart Tour over this, and I honestly don't think much of that game. Its controls are miles better, you have separate drifting controls, and it feels like there's so much more content. That is sad. So my verdict for Sonic Racing is, you're not missing a thing. A part of me expected a lot better from you, Sega. However, our next stop on this journey of what is amounting to peril so far hits me even deeper than this dumpster fire ever could. Get ready for ChuChu Rocket Universe.
ChuChu Rocket Universe!
I should probably explain why this one impacted me the most. There was a Dreamcast game in 1999 called ChuChu Rocket, which is an online multiplayer party game about guiding more mice to your rocket than your friends. It was actually the first Dreamcast online game, and it was stinking awesome. It was fast, frantic, had a great single-player puzzle mode and two-player challenge mode, a full puzzle editor that could send puzzles online, and it was just one fantastic game in general. I played it with friends as much as I could, and they somehow enjoyed it as much as I did. That doesn't happen very often. Now, there hasn't been a port of this game since the iOS and Android version in 2011, which unfortunately no longer works on modern devices. It was a faithful port minus the puzzle editor, and that's actually how I got into the game before finding a copy of the Dreamcast version. The game hasn't had a proper sequel since, despite being ported to the GBA, and then having appearances in the Sega Superstars series, as well as the original All-Stars Racing. So when Sega quietly announced that alongside Sonic Racing they were making a brand new ChuChu Rocket game exclusive to Apple Arcade, I was conflicted at best. Finally, a sequel to one of my favorite games, but exclusive to a service I wasn't sure I wanted in on to begin with. And the footage looked, well, I wasn't exactly sold, but I knew that once I got Apple Arcade that I would have to check this out. So I did, and well, let's just run through it. The primary focus here is the puzzle mode. There are several worlds with vastly different puzzles to complete in each world. You can earn 3 stars in each level, 1 for finishing it, 1 for completing it with a certain number of arrows, and 1 for completing it with 1 less arrow than before. These stars help you unlock the next world, so it's possible you'll have to replay some levels to get more stars in order to move on. That's a system I'm familiar with, but also not a big fan of. Whatever happened to just completing the puzzle and moving on? The game also has some story elements. You're actually in control of the ChuChu pilots from the manual of the original game. Chewy, Chu-P, Chu-B, and Chu-Bak. They weren't actually in the game on the Dreamcast, but they're properly in this one. They also face off against King Kapu, who's after the innocent Chuchus in the spaceport that you're trying to rescue. Beyond some iffy dialogue, that's about it. As for the gameplay, just like in the original game, your goal is to get all the mice safely to one of the rockets on the board. What they did different for this game is, well, everything else. The original game only relied on a 12x9 grid for every puzzle to be based on, yet in this game the grids can be of vastly different sizes. On top of that, sometimes you have cubical, spherical, and cylindrical puzzles where you have to rotate the map to see everything. And I can't say I'm a fan of this. Part of the challenge of ChuChu Rocket is that you have to keep track of everything that's happening at once, and if you obscure parts of the map with rotational stages, that element is completely thrown out the window. I've had puzzles where I failed, I couldn't see why I did because it was on the other side of the planet. That's not fun. That's frustrating. I don't mind the multiple level stages where the Chuchus and Kappa Kappas go up and down ramps, but if you combine that with the rotational mazes, sorry, not happening. I actually ran into a stage or two where I could not figure out what to do whatsoever. For the original game, I never had to consult a guide. I was able to figure out all the puzzles. But this game, I got so stumped that I grumbled over to YouTube and found a walkthrough. That's also not fun. That's very frustrating. So the puzzle mode isn't exactly my cup of tea. So how's the multiplayer? I enjoyed that mode so much in the original, and that mode was the game's marketing strategy at the time. So how does Universe's multiplayer stack up? Not good at all. For starters, the multiplayer mode is always online, even for bot matches. The original let you play just against bots and local friends without connecting to the internet. So what is Sega's fascination for always online play here? And it's just not fun anyway. The matches are frame-based, meaning if there's any sort of hiccup in your connection, your game freezes completely. The controls are also not very responsive, so more often than not, the move you wanted to make will just not happen. and you'll lose that question mouse or end up leading that Kappa Kappa into your rocket. And that's not pleasant. The roulette is still here, the same things still apply, but it's just not as charming as the original was. It felt like they were going for realistic graphics instead of the charming, unique graphic style. As well, I have trouble playing this on my iPhone because the screen is too small for precise placement of the arrows. The screen resolution here may make it look bigger, but even though the iPhone 11 is one of the larger iPhones, it's still too small for the precise placements that you need to do. Sorry. I've just run out of positive things to say about this game. Even the music is something I can't seem to enjoy. It feels like generic space music that tries to emulate the charm the original soundtrack had, and can't. I wanted to like this game, I really did, but I just can't, and it saddens me. Sega, if you're watching this video, please give the original ChuChu Rocket a proper HD port to modern consoles. I'd happily pay 15 to 20 bucks for a Switch version. Give it a modern internet infrastructure so that it doesn't take 5 seconds for an arrow to appear. Let us share custom puzzles again. Give the game the justice it deserves, please. My verdict for ChuChu Rocket Universe is, I miss the original so much. Jeez, this took a huge downhill turn, but I think it's time for ChuChu Rocket to have some redemption. Before this calendar year is over, I'm going to do a full review of the original Dreamcast game. I want to give this series something positive to talk about because I truly do adore the original game. But for now, let's move on to something positive from Apple Arcade. I want to save the big pieces for the end, so let's do something a bit smaller. Wait, what the golf? What the Golf labels itself as a golf game for people who hate golf. And why is that? Because in this game, while the principles of golf are almost always there, you're doing everything except putting the actual ball half the time. Sometimes you're putting the golfer himself, a house, a tree, the hole itself, and basically any inanimate object you can think of. You'll be launching cards and explosive dynamite, putting a soccer ball into a goal, putting the soccer goal itself, bowling, guiding a cycler to the end of a 2D path, shooting arrows, firing a whole planet towards the hole, basically everything that does or doesn't involve golf. It certainly makes you go, what the golf? This game's good. Pretty darn good, actually. However, I feel like it's one of those games where you play it once for the experience, and then don't really come back to it because you already know what to expect. Part of the charm the game has is not really knowing what you're going to be doing next. Will I be putting the ball this time? Am I bowling or playing soccer? Am I in space or not? These kids should bring their own soccer ball sometime. Not knowing what the game's gonna throw at you is an integral part of the experience. So if you play this on Apple Arcade, the experience is kinda ruined for you once you get it on Switch. That sucks though, because the game is really good. It's just that the replay factor is kind of diminished. So my verdict on What the Golf is, Certified Birdie. What the Golf is a fun game, it really is. I just don't see myself returning to this game after this. Maybe in a year or two when it's not fresh in my mind, I'm not too sure. It's one of Apple Arcade's most marketable titles, but it's not too high up in that list. So now let's actually look at one of Apple Arcade's top billed titles that's not the train wreck that was Sonic Racing, Hot Lava. Remember that game you'd play as a kid, The Floor is Lava? Well, this is the video game literality of it. The floor is actually lava in this first-person adventure game. You play as a character from an 80s action figure-based TV show, so basically a parody of something like Thundercats or He-Man, and your goal is simply to get to the end of the course without falling onto the lava-covered floor. The initial levels are based around a school, so the gym and playground are some of the levels you can explore, but there's plenty of other themes as well. It's a rather fleshed out game based around a simple concept like the floor being lava. However, you should try to have a Mac that can handle the graphics or a controller, because playing on a phone, boy, it comes close to ruining the experience for me. Moving forwards and backwards and jumping is not a problem. It's looking around. You are expected to tilt and rotate your phone around you basically 360 degrees to be able to aim where you're going, because the game uses your device's gyroscope. And when you swipe the screen to rotate without moving around, the game very often confuses that action for another, such as picking something up or even jumping. Like I said, it's recommended to use either a Mac or a controller on iPhone, but I'm sure many people don't have a controller that's compatible with iOS. You gonna add Joy-Con support anytime soon? I mean, this doesn't give me the same problems Rayman Mini did. I can get through the levels no problem, it's just a little extra work that I have to do. I won't knock the game's quality on the controls though, because this is a solid game, and honestly one that I'd love to see gain more prominence. It helps that Apple has marketed this game as one of Apple Arcade's highlight games, so there's a good chance that people who get Apple Arcade are going to give this game a try. And I doubt they'll be very disappointed. So my verdict on Hot Lava is a fun twist on everyone's childhood. I honestly had no idea what to expect when firing up Hot Lava, no pun intended, and was pretty surprised at how good it was. So now let's move on to some bigger things. Shantae, anyone? Congratulations, Way Forward! You're one of the few developers who were actually thinking when planning for your Apple Arcade debut. This isn't a watered-down mobile game, no. The full Shantae and the 7 Sirens is available for Apple Arcade. It's just like the version that recently came out for consoles, just with touch controls on the iOS version. The Mac version has customizable controls and everything, so I opted to play this game on Mac OS, the only time in this video where I prioritized the Mac version over the iPhone one. I don't have much experience with Shantae myself. The only game in the series I own is Pirate's Curse, and I haven't sunk much time into it. But this looks like a solid Shantae game. Exploration is abundant, enemies aren't too much of a threat at first, and the game has fully animated cutscenes. This unfortunately is an unfair game to put in this video, because to fully recommend Shantae and the 7 Sirens, I will need to have played the entire game, which could span several hours compared to other games where you get the gist of it after a few levels of play. There are other YouTubers such as Some Call Me Johnny who can give much better reviews of the game because they've actually taken the time to play it from front to end, and can give proper criticisms about it. I'm just taking a small taste of this game, but I will say that I liked what I played so far, so that counts for something, I suppose. I can't believe it took Way Forward, above all people, to finally deliver a full console-like experience to Apple Arcade. Sega and Ubisoft screwed this up big time when they had the opportunity to make it fantastic, so I'm glad that somebody actually did it. Now then, the final stop on our Apple Arcade journey is the game that actually surprised me the most, and I had the most fun with. In the most unlikely of places, a little game called Super Impossible Road. So what's in this little game that made me almost give money to Apple Arcade? It's got basic gameplay principles that it builds off of in a fun way, which is something I wish I could say for other games I covered in this video besides Spek and What the Golf. And what are these gameplay principles? Cheating. No, I'm serious. Super Impossible Road is a multiplayer racing game that actively encourages you to go off the beaten path and find your own shortcuts to the goal. It encourages you to cheat. And that is hilarious. The campaign mode gives you a selection of challenges, such as getting to the goal under a certain amount of time, beating CPUs in a race, collecting all the rings conveniently placed around shortcuts, and that sort of thing. It's not a complex game at all unless you do what the game wants you to do and cheat. Finding your own shortcuts is the best part of the game, which helps because that's how the game is marketed. But do you want to know the other reason why I love this game so much? It reminds me of F-Zero, Nintendo's high-speed racing game that hasn't had a new entry since GX on the GameCube. That's what I saw in this game at first, and I absolutely loved it. I really want to own this game, but I just can't see myself subscribing to Apple Arcade when the other games I talked about in this video just didn't live up to my expectations all the time. It makes me sad that this is exclusive to Apple Arcade in that regard. So my verdict for Super Impossible Road is super addicting and impossible to put down. It was nice to end on such a high note. Apple Arcade as a whole is very hit or miss, but if you look carefully, you'll find the diamonds in the rough, like Super Impossible Road and Spek. Every iTunes account holder gets a 30-day free trial to Apple Arcade, so I'd suggest giving it a try and seeing how you like these games, and the dozens of others I didn't get to cover. With that said, I think it's time to prepare for my next game review. Oh right, that was the Twitter poll. Next time I see you guys, it'll be with Super Monkey Ball 1 and 2. Don't miss it! Hey guys, thanks so much for watching this video, and be sure to like, subscribe, hit the bell, and all that jazz. Let me know in the comments what you thought of Apple Arcade if you've tried it yourself. And let me know if there are games that you like that I missed. I only covered 12 of these games, I'm sure I missed more diamonds in the rough. Anyway, see y'all later.